Usually things start, for instance, like you said earlier, you mentioned the Grenfell project, the Grenfell tragedy, sorry. And what usually happens is something comes out of that, out of a tragedy or an incident or whatever. So, for instance, we've got the RCD protection for outdoor lighting, which that was introduced following the tragic incident of the young boy that got killed in the pub garden.
Hello and welcome to another CF Tech Talking podcast. Thank you very much for joining us, and as always, thanks to all those people that have already subscribed, liked, shared, reposted. I think that's about it.
Seems to be going well, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
We're getting good reactions, and that's what we want, because they're chats that people should be interested in. But thank you very much for the interest you've got.
Yeah, and we've been bringing you lots of technical content from manufacturers, and today is slightly different, Dave, because today, yes, we're going more technical than ever before. We are delving into some of the requirements and regulations in the UK, and we're not doing it on our own. We are doing it with the aid of a safety net.
We've got an IET with us. Hello, Michael Peaks.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us on these CF Tech Talking podcasts. The idea of these, though, is just we get into really technical content, and we put a poll out there. So a poll went out across social media, and lots of people were voting on what they want to hear about, and we're going to go through a number of them with you. So under the spotlights, you've got to answer our questions.
No pressure there.
Bringing all that background information and the bits that nobody knows, Michael. That's what we want. The dirt. We want the dirt.
Oh, there's plenty of that.
So today, our topic for today is all about AFDDs, arc fault detection devices. So we're going to start to look at these. So the poll went out, people were voting, and this was one of them that got an awful lot of interest. So if I just refer to, and I've got here with me my regs book, my new brown regs book, so we're looking through this one, and at the front here, it talks about what the changes were, the introduction to the Second Amendment, and it says, under Chapter 42, Protection Against Thermal Effects, it says, Regulation 421.1.7 has been redrafted. Now, in the past, that regulation used to mention AFDDs, but that's about it. It says it's been redrafted, and it is now a requirement to protect final circuit supplying socket outlets with a rated current does not exceed 32 amps using arc fault detection devices. This is the bit. In certain circumstances, it says here, in higher risk residential buildings, homes of multiple occupation, purpose-built student accommodation, and care homes. So
that's a shift, isn't it, Mike? I mean, if we think about the way these are being deployed now, that's quite different to the way they were first suggested when we heard about them as recommendations. So what's the difference? Why the shift?
Well, like with most things with the wiring regs, it's all about compromise and consensus. So when something gets proposed, the camp's generally split in two. You'll have half the camp that
those that don't want it, definitely not putting it in, and then there are those,
and those that want it everywhere.
Yeah.
And with it's a democracy, JPEL is, and we have to come to a compromise. So the compromise was we picked out the buildings we felt that were most at risk, and we applied it that way.
So this would have been in Subcommittee B. So this would have been in Subcommittee B, looking at thermal effects here. So those sat around the room, there would have been people there representing the scheme providers, people representing BEMA, and BEMA represent all the manufacturers, or majority of manufacturers for low voltage switchgear and control gear throughout Europe. So they would have been sitting there saying, yes, you do, no, you don't. And then it came to this. But the change we're noticing big time is it used to be more about the construction, Dave.
Well, it did, didn't it? I mean, if you look back, because arc fault circuit interrupters, as they were called in America, they'd been used for years, but on wooden buildings, places that could easily catch fire. Same in Germany, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we focused in the first time it was recommendation was on combustible atmospheres, wasn't it? Dusty atmospheres. Yeah. So in those discussions, what changed? Why did we go down the route of these different types of buildings and not so much the construction?
I suppose it's the consequences, Dave. With the buildings that we've listed there, it's the consequences of a fire. So a high-rise building, the method of escape, a care home, etc., where you don't usually have a strict evacuation procedure. You usually have a horizontal evacuation procedure in such places.
So this, I mean, the unspoken thing here is Grenfell, isn't it? Clearly that was a massive building which had to be evacuated and wasn't particularly effectively, and people died. Where do we get 6 stories or 18 metres.
Now you're
That's the
referring to
definition.
this bit, aren't
Yeah.
you? You're referring to this bit where it says higher risk residential buildings. Now the definition of that is 6 stories or above,
18 metre,
or 18 metres, whichever it needs to be.
So who came up with that one?
That is down to legislation. And when we drafted this reg, it was before the legislation on the Building Safety Act was finalised. So at the time, we was advised that it was going to be a HRRB, a high-risk residential building. If we look at the Building Safety Act, which came out in April, it's now just a HRB.
HRB,
Yes.
which stands for
High-risk building. Now, it's not always to do with height, you see. So we talk about this 18 metres and the stories, but a high-risk building could be over 2 stories, but it could be really complex horizontally.
It could.
So it's not just, that's an example of a HRB, but it could also be another complex building.
So what you're suggesting here, Michael, is then our regulations at the moment would have us putting in AFDDs in anything 6 stories and above. But actually, when this gets changed, which I believe the Third Amendment is going to be coming soon, so yeah, hold on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen. But when the Third Amendment, that may change because that definition isn't the same anymore. Is that right?
The HRB definition, yes, I'm sure we'll have to look at it again and see what other buildings it covers to see if that list needs expanded.
But presumably it will widen as opposed to contract. So those people who are now installing them won't say, "Come on, guys, we just put them in."
Yeah, no, I don't.
It would still be a building over 6 stories.
Yes.
So
But it may be a flat, complex building.
Yes.
As well as a building over. So there'll be the 2 requirements in there probably to look at. So for those of you that are fitting AFDDs and you are working in them, don't think as soon as the next amendment kicks in, you're going to have to go around taking them all out again. No, you don't.
So this whole process of wrestling a device like an AFDD into our lives, that sounds like a real compromise right down the line. I mean, how does that happen? When did you first hear about the fact that they could start to introduce them into the regs?
Well, I've only been at the IET for 4 years, and it was certainly on the table when I first joined. Usually things start, for instance, like you said earlier, you mentioned the Grenfell project, the Grenfell tragedy, sorry. And what usually happens is something comes out of that, out of a tragedy or an incident or whatever. So, for instance, we've got the RCD protection for outdoor lighting, which that was introduced following the tragic incident of the young boy that got killed in the pub garden. So, unfortunately, it's usually in response to an event as such.
So we can expect, can we, that the scope will widen by Amendment 3?
What we can expect is there's certainly going to be a lot more debate around AFDDs.
Well done, Michael. Well done for sitting on that fence. I'll get him some tweezers to get rid of splinters. Now, I think one thing that we can safely say is at the minute, it's only for final circuits. So that it's only final circuits, not distribution circuits, and it's only for final circuits that are supplying socket outlets. So this is going to be somebody installing a ring or a radial to supply those socket outlets up to 32 amps, isn't it? So this is, and it's also one bit I do notice here, single phase as well. So if I've got a 3-phase socket outlet, 16 amp, it doesn't need to have AFDD protection.
No, I'm not sure that the manufacturer is in a position to produce one of these devices at the moment. That's probably what's holding us back in terms of 3-phase.
But that was a limiting factor when they were first posited, wasn't it? Because we had these double units, the ones that were activating an RCD or an RCBO. Now we've got the single unit. So is it really a technology-driven imposition, this?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So this would lead to manufacturers coming up with a device that was able to do it, and I believe also that it's all to do with the software. It's not necessarily the mechanical side of it. I think you look at the manufacturers, and they've had that side covered for years. Yeah. This is actually getting the software right, and that's the bit, isn't it? Getting the actual software, because in these devices, Dave, as you and I know, because we've spent quite a lot of time looking at these, haven't we?
Talking about them.
Yeah. So there's a certain amount of parameters that are built into these AFDDs, and once those parameters are triggered, then the device will start to then trip.
Well, it's typically 5, isn't it? To do with the magnitude of the fault current, to do with the phase, the background noise. These are the ones, and there is a fairly narrow window during which all 5 tick the box, in which case it should go. And I don't hear many people saying that they're tripping falsely. I think they're by and large pretty reliable.
I mean, there have been some reports that people are saying they're tripping left, right and centre, but again, I think that comes down to what the microchip inside, the microprocessor inside, what phase that has come out at. So again, it's about understanding your partners who you want to purchase your devices from and making sure they're as up to date as possible. There are out there on the market now, there are self-updating devices as well. So there are those that can connect wirelessly to the internet and they can then update their firmware.
Well, they are smart devices. They are effectively small computers. So Michael, when the device is brought into the regs, how much of that manufacturing is considered, and the state of the market and such like? Because Beamer are their manufacturer represented on the panels. So will they put the brakes on or push hard for something to come in depending on its state of readiness?
Yes, they certainly wouldn't be pushing for it to come in the wiring regs if they knew they couldn't fulfil the demand, so to speak. Yes, definitely.
But they may put the brakes on if they know they can't.
Yes, possibly. Yeah.
So I want to just take a look at the other indents. There's four indents here where it clearly says in the regulation 421.1.7, it says ARC fault detection devices conforming to BSEN 62606 shall. The key word there is shall be provided for single phase AC final circuit supply socket outlets with a rated current not exceeding 32 amps in higher risk residential buildings. You've explained that one, Michael. Now the other one is homes of multiple occupation. Yeah, so HMOs.
Registered with the local authority. I inquired, and that's if they're registered with the local authority as a home of multiple occupation.
Yeah, you have to go through licensing to get that.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to go work today, if I got to go in, replace a socket outlet because one's been broken, replacing a like for like, I don't have to worry about it.
No, only a new circuit.
However, if I say that the landlord said, come in and do some work and I want another socket add-in, that new socket has to have protection from an AFDD. But I can't do that individually because these devices go in consumer units. So I'd have to offer AFDD protection to the whole circuit just for that one extra. Am I right in saying that?
You are right in saying that. It could go even further than that, Darren, because the AFDD that you've selected might not be compatible with the existing consumer unit. So it may be a case that, yes.
Yeah.
If your manufacturer of what's in the consumer unit doesn't make one that's suitable, you'd have to change the whole lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Or what I'm thinking here is solution-wise is you'd probably go to a smaller consumer unit and then from there you'd supply just your socket outlets.
Yes.
16 amp radial or 20 amp radial that goes out to those new sockets that have been installed.
Yeah.
So you'd look to do those. Now, purpose-built student accommodation, it's telling us there, again, we must be using ARC fault detection devices. And I think that's because we all know how students go.
Absolutely. You see what students do in their rooms.
Well, one of the biggest benefits to AFDDs is they're really good at detecting, for instance, trapped flexible cables.
Right.
Students' bedroom, four-way extension leads all the way around the bedroom, etc.
PlayStation.
Yes.
Because we've been saying on the Tech Talks that by and large they're not there for the fixed installation, are they? The thing that they're likely to pick up the most is the trapped cable, something which is external to the fixed wiring. Would you say that's generally true?
Generally true, yes. As in that they're no good at picking up series arc faults with ring circuits. That they will pick up parallel arcing faults though, so that they can protect against the fixed wiring. But I would agree that they're more there to protect against the items that are plugged in.
And what's hanging on the end of the wire as well.
Yes.
Whatever dodgy appliance has been plugged in there. Yeah.
And the other one here is care homes. They're asking for all care homes that have got socket outlets, if you're going to go installing new socket outlets in those care homes, that those also have to be protected with an AFDD. Now, this is at the moment. Now, what I'm interested in, Mike, do you have any sense of where the harmonised document is going with this one, or where it currently sits? So, for those that don't know, we take our technical intent of BS 7671 from a number of sources. The main source is the harmonised document that sits above it in CENLEC. Now, how much has that got about AFDDs in it? I mean, you've just come back from international duties, haven't you? Where have you been?
I've been to Barcelona, but this was an MT4 meeting, so this was a little bit different to what we normally do in JPEL.
Right, but regardless of that, AFDDs are in our regs, they're in CENLEC, they're in HDs. How many AFDDs did you see in Barcelona?
I didn't see any, but I didn't go purposely looking for them, if I'm honest.
But how many of the other European countries under Senelec have actually made them, as we have, shells? Are they all in there?
Germany, I think a hell of a lot in Germany.
Well, they were, weren't they?
I can't answer the question as to the countries that have made them into shells, but what I can say is, as it sits in the HD at the moment, it's a recommendation. It is not a shell, and it's for all circuits. So it's
all circuits.
Yes, and it's,
Right.
so it's as we had it in the 18th.
What we did back
Yes,
in
it
the 18th.
is, yeah.
So why have we gone harder on the shell then? Why did we do it when nobody else did?
We felt that it was necessary to. Like I say, some people felt that some people say that the fire at the Grenfell was caused by an arc fault. So it was felt that could be a benefit.
Pushed us down that road.
Yeah, I should probably say we're still waiting for the complete outcome from that inquiry. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, you're saying that the others are recommending it for all. Clearly in the regulation here, it says here, for all other premises, the use of arc fault detection devices is recommended for AC final circuits. Now, Dave, we know full well that their current parameters is that one of those 5 things that it needs to identify before it trips is a certain magnitude. And
Yes.
I believe in the standard it's more than 1.5 amps. So 1.5 amps needs to be drawn through the device, and that arc needs to sustain itself for a certain period at that rating for it to start to think about tripping. Lighting circuits then, maybe that's why you've left it out, because lighting circuits nowadays, with lots of LEDs,
LEDs, yeah. You're never going to get that, even with them all on.
Yeah, you're not
Yes.
going to get the 1.5, are you?
No, and that was part of the compromise. It was seen that if we made a blanket rule to put them across all circuits, it could be deemed a waste of money on circuits such as that where they would probably never work. So.
Yeah, so you're putting in that additional bit of kit, really, and only using a very small fraction of what it's capable of doing, aren't you?
Yes.
That's to me, sounds as an agreeable compromise.
Well, that's sensible. Yeah? We like a bit of common sense from the JPEL.
Don't get it very often, so we'll take that one. And so probably on that note, we should probably leave it there.
And we found some common sense. Stop, quick.
So, Michael, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for everyone for listening to another CF Tech Talking podcast. Please share, like, and don't forget, repost this and let everyone know exactly what's going on over at CEF. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you all soon.